Hello, Eric here from Wisdom Heart. Welcome to the ongoing series of talks on astrology for awakening. What we do in these conversations is we look at the heavens as they're currently unfolding and the symbols of the astrological universe, and we reflect on them, not so much to focus on what's going to happen to me, not so much to focus on what's going to happen to the politics, although these are all valid concerns. The concern in this context of the astrology for awakening is, how can we have a deeper conversation with the archetypal energies that are reflected in the astrological patterns so that they can connect us with those energies and with the wisdom that's potentially encoded in them in order to awaken, to realize more fully our true nature, to embody more completely the wisdom energies of those archetypes in a wholesome and life-giving way, to express them in order to become, in a sense, agents of awakening in our life and in our world. And the aspect that I'm going to focus on today is the upcoming Sun opposed Pluto. Now, the Sun and Pluto are in an annual conversation. Every year the Sun comes around and touches Pluto, and then 6 months later it opposes Pluto. We're at that 6-month point. And whenever we're at the point where two planets are facing off with each other, where the Sun is facing off with Pluto, it's like a symbolic full moon relationship. They're staring at each other, and it's halfway through the cycle, a beautiful time for pausing and reflecting on what has occurred in that first half of the cycle so that we can make a mindful, a thoughtful, a reflective readjustment. So the Sun, Pluto, that's a relationship between life and death. The Sun represents life. The Sun represents the source of life, the center of our life, the vitality of our life. The Sun is the center of the solar system, not the center of the cosmos, but it's the center of this solar system. And thus, symbolically, it represents the center of your own microcosmic solar system, your inner universe, as it were. Carl Jung recognized that sun symbol is a representation of the self which is the emissary, the embodiment of consciousness and radiance within the individual, guiding us on a path that he called the path of individuation. We would call the path of awakening, the path of more fully experiencing the radiance, more completely embodying the solar radiance, more deeply and more authentically expressing the creative, life-giving force of that Sun in our daily life. Pluto is quite the opposite. Pluto is the lord of the underworld, the lord of the dark, the lord of death, not of radiance, not of that which holds everything together like the Sun holds the solar system, but more like Lord Shiva. Pluto is the lord who dances and everything comes apart. It comes apart, it unravels, it deconstructs, it dissolves its form, and it dies so that it can be reborn, reformed, and renewed. So there is this ongoing dialogue, really with every breath, but now highlighted at this moment when the Sun and Pluto are in opposition. We're in a place now where we can clearly see, clearly feel the innate tension between what's holding me together and what's asking me to die to that old form. This is the dialogue between the Sun and Pluto, and it's being brought to the foreground this week. Now, in the collective, we can trace back 6 months roughly, and we can see that there was a seed of energy that was released from the depths with the in the United States with the conflicts over the election results, and now we're coming back around to kind of look at who are we as a collective. Who do we want to be? What do we want to stand for and radiate out of our being? Maybe something has to die, an old form, an old identity. But for us individually, we have the same question. What is the Dharma that we have been living for over these 6 months? And is it a true representation of the solar light, the radiant light that we wish to bring into the world? Not yes or no answer, but how can we begin to make adjustments? What aspects of our orientation need to die in order to be reborn? What aspects of our philosophy, what aspects of our presentation, what aspects of our orientation need to be released in order to be reborn? This is the spiritual practice of meditation, which is a practice that ideally we do at least every day, once a day, and we cultivate our familiarity with this dialogue between the radiant life of awakening and the necessity to die to the older self in order to be reborn again. In our tradition of Kriya Yoga, there's a beautiful text called the Kriya Bindu. It's a short, Bindu means like a dewdrop, and of Kriya wisdom. So it's a short 12-page text, and at one point in the text, it really refers to the essential symbolism of this Sun-Pluto dynamic when it says this, that the most vital task for all yogis, for all mystics, is to have a complete understanding of the birth, death, rebirth cycle. And that's what Pluto Sun is about. It's about the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Right now, we're at this juncture, this opposition point, this tipping point. The birth came when the Sun and Pluto were together 6 months ago. Now we're up to this opposition where we can consciously, that's the key, where we can consciously and intentionally die to the forms of belief and identity which are outmoded. We can release them and enter into a process that will return us back to a new awakening, a new birth. It says in the text, so this is the most vital task, is to understand that. And we get this opportunity right now to understand the birth, death, rebirth cycle. The sage says, when you find self-conscious awareness in the midst of birth, death, rebirth cycle, then you no longer perceive birth or death as the ordinary earthling does. Again, that's the opportunity of this time, is to have a revelation that transforms your understanding of life and death from the conventional and conditioned view, the conventional and conditioned view, which is need to hold on to this form of self against all odds. As we let it go, we discover a deeper nature. And that deeper nature is what transforms our understanding of birth and death from the conventional view to the mystical, deep understanding. At that moment of seeing, the text continues, you understand that birth and death are samadhi itself. Samadhi is a technical term for the realization of the spirit, the realization of life itself. And we realize that every moment, whether it's a moment of taking form or a moment of releasing form, it is the action of samadhi. It is the revelation in time. Thus, the desire to escape birth or death ceases. Who wants to escape birth? Many people are escaping the invitation of this life. They're going unconscious. And many people are fleeing from death, which is the requirement to shed an old way of being in order to be renewed. Clinging in either case is released, and you are free from the anguish and pain of death as well as of birth. So this is the key and the fundamental principle of the path. This principle transcends all other principles. Understanding, not intellectually, experientially, the very nature of birth, taking form, death, releasing that form, rebirth, discovering the generative presence of the spirit itself, being reborn. This is the period of time when you can explore that. This Pluto-Sun relationship is the invitation to discover breath by breath that your life is the revelation of the Spirit through birth, through death, through rebirth. This is Eric, Astrology for Awakening. Let's continue the conversation.